Buckets, buckets, buckets. We use this term a lot in our arena videos, but not everyone may know what it means. We want to take this opportunity to describe what the bucket system is and how you can take advantage of it. We'll give you some specific examples of cards in the bucket system that are near auto picks, which will increase your win rate in the arena. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more Tempo Storm news and Hearthstone content. Now let's begin. Back in the Witchwood expansion, the bucket drafting system was introduced. In Arena, you pick a card out of 3, and you end up drafting a 30-card deck this way. Before the bucket system, the 3 cards that appear together are random. You often ended up in a situation where one card is clearly stronger than the other 2, and very little thought process is required to pick the right cards. With the bucket system, the idea was to have 3 cards of similar power level appear together to make each choice more challenging. The term bucket refers to how cards are grouped together. For example, Flamestrike, Polymorph, and Fireball are grouped together in the same bucket. You will never have to pick between Flamestrike and Wisp again with this system. Currently, there are 7 buckets, with Bucket 1 having the most powerful cards, like Swipe, and Bucket 7 with the worst cards, like Leopardome. The system was made more complex when they introduced overlapping buckets. Certain cards from Bucket 1 can be grouped with certain cards from Bucket 2. Here's one example. Conjurer's Calling in Bucket 1 can appear with Water Elemental in Bucket 2. We will not go into more detail about this now, but you can read more about the Designer Insight article in the description to this video. The bucket system is supposed to have cards of similar power level appear in the same buckets. But who determines the power level of cards? Initially, when a set is rotating, the balance team places all the cards in these buckets. As you can imagine, some cards could end up in the wrong buckets due to being overvalued or undervalued. In about a week or so, re-bucketing happens. This is when cards move up or down a bucket based on its pick rate. If a card is picked very often, it will move up a bucket. If it is picked very little, it will move down one. Because buckets are ultimately decided by the players, a good player will take advantage of the system by drafting under-bucketed cards and avoid over-bucketed cards. In this case, the term underbucketed means a card is in a bucket where most of the cards in it are weaker in comparison. By recognizing underbucketed cards, you can identify strong classes and deck archetypes by drafting around these cards since they will be picked more often. For example, in the last rotation, Evil Genius and Evil Miscreant were the most underbucketed cards in Arena. Evil Miscreant was originally compared with cards like Chillwind Yeti and the Scarlet Crusader in Bucket 5. The card was an auto pick, and you could have a deck with 6 Miscreants, and it can easily get you to high wins. Now, with the rise of the mech rotation, we have identified 5 underbucketed cards you should strongly consider picking to increase your win rate. These cards are so strong in the current meta that they could move up to 2 buckets, and it would still be a good pick. Number 1 would be Fan of Knives. Currently, Fan of Knives is in the 4th bucket, and is compared with cards such as Piloted Sky Golem, Burly Shovelfist, and Perdition's Blade. At face value, a 1 damage AoE that draws you a card seems weak for 3 mana. In Rosticon's Rumble, Fan of Knives wasn't very good when Dragonmaw Scorcher was much more common and got the job done better. In Rise of Shadows, Fan of Knives is perfectly suited for the meta. There are a lot of tokens right now, with Druid leading the aggressive strategies. Every class is drafting lackeys, and Fan of Knives does a great job of clearing these messy boards. We find that 2 Fan of Knives strongly enhance the quality of rogue decks, and is the card to pick right now in this bucket. There are some premium neutral minions in the same bucket, such as Eccentric Scribe, Proud Defender, and Dalaran Crusader. Even then, you should still pick the first fan in most cases. It's important to note that Fan of Knives is being offered quite often at the moment. The best advice we can give you is to draft 3 AoEs maximum. Despite being an underbucketed card, you still don't want to draft too many. 2. Fellreaver. In the same bucket as Fan of Knives, there's also the scariest mech you can drop on turn 5. Players generally do not want to see their decks getting milled, and to them, it feels really bad to see your premium cards shattered into a million pieces. However, milling cards will hardly be impactful in the arena. This is because in an aggressive meta, you will almost never end up in fatigue. You might lose some premium cards, but statistically, most cards in your deck are not premium. So what's the benefit of Fellreaver with such a downside? An 8/8 usually costs around 8 mana. Playing it on turn 5 gains you 3 mana of tempo. In this meta, tempo is king, and large removal is rarer than ever. Your opponent has to deal with Fel Reaver while it continues to hit face, but Giant Mech is an auto pick in aggressive decks. With how fast the meta is right now, Fel Reaver gives you just enough of a tempo lead to seal the game. Number 3. Hench Clan Hogsteed. We've talked about this little fella throughout Rise of Shadows, and it just keeps getting better and better. In such a fast meta, you're looking at any premium early game tools to control the board early. Hogsteed kills 3 2s and leaves a body behind. 2 other cards with similar effects are Argent Horse Rider and Spring Rocket. Now in most scenarios, Hogsteed is a mana cheaper for 1 less attack. That is quite a bargain considering 1 mana is usually worth about 3 points of stats. We'll look at this in another way. Hench Clan Hogsteed is basically a blue guild warrior with a wisp attached. That's pretty valuable. In all seriousness, Hogsteed is the card to pick whenever it shows up. There are only a few instances where you don't pick it. For example, for Rogue, where small damage is very easy to come by, you will sometimes pass Hogsteed for a curve minion. For classes with hero powers that cannot deal damage, Hogsteed should almost always be picked first to fight the board early. Number 4. Light's Justice. This is the paladin weapon that deals 1 damage with 4 charges. This card is in the 6th bucket, which has some really forgettable curve minions, such as Silvermoon Guardian and Spiteful Smith. Paladin right now does have access to a lot of weapons, such as Muster for Battle, Coghammer, and True Silver Champion. However, these cards are in the top bucket, and they aren't too common. Even with other weapons, Paladin can draft about 3 weapons in one deck to raise the consistency of a weapon being drawn in the early game. So, what makes Light's Justice so strong? Weapons in general offer a lot of tempo, but Light's Justice is a 1 mana weapon with 4 charges. This means for 3 other turns, Paladin can deal an extra damage without paying mana. It is specifically strong right now because top classes like Rogue, Druid, and other Paladins draft very aggressively. Oftentimes, the curve starts on turn 1, and Light's Justice can smack the Pirates, Living Roots, and Recruits while saving the tempo for later. The card is close to an auto pick, but it should be avoided if you already have 3 weapons. And at number 5, Dark Bargain. This spell is currently in the worst bucket right now, despite being a ridiculously strong removal tool. With how light and aggressive your card should be, you are often very low on cards after turn 6. At that point, Dark Bargain can remove any 2 minions without discarding any cards. In the worst bucket, this spell will steal wins because nobody will play around it. Realistically, you shouldn't be playing around Dark Bargain either, because it is an epic card. And because it's also in the worst bucket, the spell would rarely ever show up during drafts. Now, there is some obvious downside to it. It restricts your deck building to avoid high mana cards. But in the new meta, you're looking at drafting at most 3 cards above 6 mana. In this scenario, the value of Dark Bargain goes up immensely. In conclusion, identifying underbucketed cards is one way to increase your win rate. When the bucket system was initially introduced, there were a lot of misbucketed cards. Our arena expert Tachi took advantage of this system by identifying the success of Shaman back in Witchwood. He was able to reach number 1 on the arena leaderboard with nearly an 11 win average with Shaman. Nowadays, the bucket system is a lot better. Underbucketed cards still exist, but it's not as obvious as before. We mentioned the 5 cards before that are very good in this meta. Special mentions go to Shooting Star and Arcade Explosion for also being premium in the lower buckets. Our list here by no means is an exhaustive one. For example, we feel strongly that Sea Giant, Unidentified Contract, and Walking Fountain should be in the top bucket. None of these currently are, so it's always a bargain to draft them. We hope you learned something about the bucket system and how to abuse it in this video. What cards do you consider auto picks in the Hearthstone arena? What success have you found so far? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, like and subscribe for more quality Hearthstone content. We'll see you guys in the next one.